Hey guys, how you doing? This is Craig here from Bass Lessons Melbourne, and today for the player profile video, I'm joined by Mr. Ben Wicks.
Hey.
How are you, man?
It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming round, taking the time out, and bringing your gear with you.
Yeah. I brought some toys.
Yeah. So, maybe just tell us a little bit about your journey bass-wise, how you got into it. How, did your upbringing affect it, parents' music or whatever?
Well, yeah, I mean, neither of my parents played, but music was a big part of the household. There was always music, there was always
good music?
Songs. Well, that's... Mum had a thing for Tim Finn, but outside of that, lots of Bob Marley and lots of folk, lots of Billy Bragg. I grew up wanting to be Billy Bragg.
Yeah, right. It's a bit of British stuff.
Yeah. My parents spent a lot of time in England before I was born. But yeah, I mean, Mum used to tell the story of me as a 3-year-old standing in the kitchen when she was cooking, playing air guitar to the radio, and I used to plug my amp in, which was the fridge. Which you
went through the whole rigmarole
as a 3-year-old. I was like, yeah, this is the thing, which is quite telling, I guess, ending up as a bass player. And I had my first guitar. I demanded my first guitar at 3 apparently, and about 4 I was still talking about it. So my parents kind of gave in. And
had you seen bands play at this point, or was it just TV and just?
I don't know. I must have. My parents were those kind of parents that taking me to festivals and folk festivals and stuff would have been a part of it. And just for me, it was always just being a part of what was going on around me, and it still is to today. Like just getting in and getting your hands dirty.
Part of the fabric.
Yeah, and yeah. So as a little kid, it was music was around, and my parents got divorced when I was about 8 or 9, and I guilt tripped my dad. I remember dragging him into Manny's. I think it was Manny's Revolver before it was whatever it is now, but on Chapel Street. And pulling this P-bass copy, purple P-bass copy off a wall, and playing a couple of things, and basically guilt tripping him into buying it for me. And that was the end of it. I've been playing bass ever since. I think that the longest I've been without a bass in my hand since I was 9 or whatever.
And did you, 6 weeks. Were you wanting a guitar and you accidentally got a bass?
No, it wasn't.
That would be a great story for how you started playing bass. Well, I thought it was a guitar.
I thought it was a guitar. It looked like a guitar. No, I heard Curtis Mayfield. I heard Superfly, the soundtrack to Superfly. One of my older cousins was playing it. I was like, what's that? That bit, that. And he's like, oh, that's the electric bass, and that was it.
Right.
That was,
I mean, you living in Melbourne?
Yeah, we were here in Melbourne, and guilted Dad into it. And I don't know whether it was because physically playing the guitar, the physical action, the mechanics of it's similar or whatever, but it was, quite comfortable and
felt like home straight
away. And it wasn't until I was in high school that playing was this thing, that the cool kids did, and which had something to do with me, I suppose, swinging away at it. But yeah, I've been playing ever since. A lot of punk, a lot of fuzz pedals, and a lot of that stuff. Never got into the pick, never, and I still struggle with it today. Like I quite often in a session somewhere, someone's like, "Oh, can you do that?" But you play it with a pick, and I'll get through a tune, but to do a gig with a pick, my hand would cramp up, I reckon.
Yeah, right.
With King Wolf, one of the bands I play with, I tend to play chords and stuff, and I was tearing up my hands, smashing the bass. So the boys bought me some bass picks and went, "Can you stop bleeding on the stage, please?" So yeah, but not often. So yeah, the punk thing, and a mate of mine from England, Mark Brennan, who's still over there playing a monster. He was a absolute virtuoso of a blues jazz guy at like 15. He was just world class, and we met in an orchestra pit playing the school production of Bye Bye Birdie or something. We were both in this pit playing the tunes, and we hit it off, and he dragged me along to a Lloyd Spiegel show when I was 16 or 17 or something, and that was the show at the Continental, and it's still, like, I still remember it quite vividly. It's one of the only musical experiences that I've ever had that's quite visceral for me. And
what's the Continental now? Is it still there?
Well, no, it's not there. Hasn't been there for a long time, but it was the room.
Yeah,
you know, the jazz blues sit down vibe. It was the room for that, and great show. It's actually a recording. That show was recorded.
Oh, cool.
Unbeknownst to the band, and released as an album. So it's
a bootleg, or?
Well, no, it was actually Lloyd got a hold of it and released it. And it was so it's quite nice to be able to put that record on and go, that's the turning point. You know, him playing Lonely, and it was this like wow moment.
Do you know who the bass player was at the time?
Well, Dave. Was his bass player, but Dave, for some reason, I don't know why, but Dave didn't do that show. It was an older cat who I don't know. But that was a big turning point for me. The blues and just feeling something. You know, it was the first time that it wasn't about being obnoxious. It was the first time about, you know, telling a story. And growing up with that folk stuff, I guess. There's that crossover to telling a story. So the blues, which I still, you know, I play blues gigs 4 nights a week now.
Yeah. So how long have you been playing for?
You know, how long was a bit of a string? I don't know. I mean, 9. I say when I got my first P bass copy.
Yeah.
And I'm 34, so...
You sure?
You know, I'm doing the math on that too. I'm 34, so you do the math and...
and a number will come up?
A number will come up. 20, too long.
Over 20 years.
Too long to not be able to pay the rent.
So through high school, you're just playing like high school bands, like punk bands and stuff like that?
Punk bands and stuff.
Because I don't imagine there would have been anybody else really playing the blues.
No.
Although it is always a good, you know, common ground for jamming and stuff, and I try and introduce it to students, you know, as a framework for just playing. You know, you don't necessarily need to know the song.
No.
You just need to know 4 or 5 basic things, and you can kind of get through it. Yeah,
and I mean that moment, that was a really big one for me. I used to go to a jam in Williamstown where I grew up, and that was someone taught me the blues, and that was my intro to jamming with people. And I think at first I was a little disheartened by how straightforward that was, or how simple that was to do. But very quickly you kind of work out that you can play a note 100 different ways. And so it becomes less about, well, for me personally, my musical journey and my musical exploration's got a lot less to do with playing like Jarko or playing like Victor Wooten, and not that I don't love what they've done and what they do, and you know, mind-blowing stuff. But for me, it did come back to, you know, how deep in a pocket you can get, and how many ways I can play that G chord or that G note.
When you reach your 48th turnaround, you know.
Yeah, you're looking for something new, you know, and you know, understanding chords and understanding chord substitutions and understanding what's in a chord, you know, is super, super important for a bass player. You know, totally. There's no, you know, arpeggiating. Fuck. Like that whole arpeggiating the major scale is the most important part of all of it, I think. And knowing that, I'm playing a 2 chord, well, I've got, what notes have I got? What choices have I got? When someone calls an E7 sharp 9, you got to know that there's a D and a G in that chord. Yeah. You know, so even though you're only playing the E and you're sitting in that pocket, you've got to know. Yeah. So it's that.
Did you kind of absorb the stuff on the gig, or was it like somebody, a mentor who was
Well,
showing you, or?
I absorbed a lot on the gig, the pentatonic scale and the major scale and the minor scale and on those things that you need to get by. It's alive.
I guess on the gig you were learning it.
Yeah, like picking up all of the building blocks.
Yep.
And at some point, a cousin of mine got into VCA and he went off and studied for a little while. And at that point, I was touring and playing and not making a living, but I was busy.
What age is this?
Playing 20.
Okay.
And I had this notion that I needed to study. So I gave that a crack for a little while. I enrolled and went to the Gordon Institute down in Geelong when it was still a straight jazz course, which has changed. Apparently, it's now more a contemporary, or it was a contemporary. Now it's actually completely stopped. But yeah, I had a really good mentor down there, and I always had a really hard time when people would throw letters at me and throw charts in front of me and stuff. And I always really, really struggled. And the first thing that Rob Gaydor is his name, he's still out that way playing, monster. Okay. Absolute monster jazz cat. And he broke it all down and showed me the number system.
Okay.
Which was revolutionary for me, and it opened so many doors, understanding that it wasn't about having to have all of the information all the time, that you could literally go, well, there's 7 notes that are important. And of those 7 notes, there's sort of 5 that are important. And really look at it and work backwards from there was a real turning point for me.
It's almost like a zip folder of harmony. Zip,
Totally.
Whereas like you go, you know that your 2 chord contains X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So it's just
every 2 chord, everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it's a dominant 7 chord, 2 chord, But
yeah,
but
that's
so you were down there for you were down there for how long?
Not long enough, about 6 months. It was a 2-year course or something, and I just, it was really hard to go and sit in a classroom for me and be surrounded by, not that there was a massive age gap, but there would have been a couple of year age gap between me and the average kid, and sit there and have them, kind of teaching me these things, and some of them I found super relevant and I still use today.
Yeah.
Still use every time I pick the instrument up.
Yeah.
But a lot of it, I wasn't really into jazz.
Yeah.
Personally, and when you're getting phone calls going, hey man, we're in Sydney doing this gig, what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing homework, I'm writing charts, and it didn't take too long for me to just go, well, this is not really where I want to be.
Yeah.
So I took the number system and I took extensions and a little bit of chord theory away from that time, and added it to the pot of things that I already had going on, and that was the extent. I mean, I still occasionally I'll go and hang out with Steve Hadley and geek out and learn as much as I can from Hadley and Chris Becker, and sit down with those guys and work on something that I'm not quite understanding, or something that I'm struggling with as a player, or something that I'm playing that makes sense to me, but I don't understand why it makes sense to me. It sounds right and it feels good, which makes it completely right regardless, in my opinion. But, it doesn't take long before you're asking yourself the questions why.
Yep.
And having a guy around, or a guru that you can kind of call and go, hey, this is happening, what's the go?
And I like to say it's kind of like learning theory, reading, or harmony. Like, it's just a shortcut. It doesn't change. It shouldn't really fundamentally change your goal as a player, but it's just a shortcut to getting to play what you want. What you want to play on the instrument.
Yeah.
Like, instead of that trial and error, going, is it this note? No. Is it this note? No. Would that work? If you can go, okay, it's in this key. This is the changes. You know exactly your parameters, and you can get there a lot quicker. Yeah,
definitely. And I think it's important to sort of keep a handle on that, through all of my playing. And the gigs that you turn up to or I found personally, the gigs you turn up to, maybe a little underprepared, playing with guys that are scary players, or
which happens a lot in Melbourne.
It does. And you turn up and you're there, and because you're maybe not super confident. I mean, you know the chords and you got your ear on, so you're all right. But the gigs that you sit in that pocket, find that bass drum and sit on that bass drum.
Yeah,
they're the ones you get the calls back from. They're the ones that are like, hey, we're off to Sydney next month. Do you want to come and do this show? Or, oh, we've got a day recording. Can you come in and do that thing? Those nights that there was a little bit of fear, and you were actually playing right on the edge of that fear is the days that, or those shows that you get the call back for.
Do you find there's the same kind of work as there was when you were mid-20s? Well, 10 years ago?
It's, the industry's changing on every level, and everyone's trying to adapt. Yes, there's still gigs out there. You can still gig in Melbourne 4, 5, 6, 7 nights a week. You can. But the pivot point on that is you can only ever make $100, $150 a night. So, yeah, you can gig 7 nights a week, but can you live on $700 a week? And you can if you want to live like a student.
Yeah.
But if you want to live like a grown-up, I don't know that if you
want to buy gear.
If you want to own 8 basses, if you want 7 Ps, you need a job.
Exactly.
Yeah. And Ps, the P.
Yeah.
This is the one.
Does it have any kind of name?
Well, we're running with B.
For bass?
For bass. For Beautiful.
Yeah.
For Bespoke, which is the company that built it for me.
Okay.
And it is everything that I've ever wanted in an instrument. I mean, and we were discussing this before, but it's like you go on this search for tone, and you start where you start, which is generally a P or a jazz bass or in that kind of either side of the fence. And I went on a journey,
A Lord of the Rings quest.
Yeah, that's what it was like.
One bass to rule them all.
Definitely, and 10 years, 15 years later or whatever it was, here I am sitting playing a P bass, and it voices the way I want it. It feels like an extension of me, which is all those things that people say when they're trying to sell you something, I guess. But I through Wicks and different high-end court stuff in the 90s, when they were in the 2000s and stuff, when they were really making some nice stuff with Bartolini pickups in it. And, Ibanez, Music Man, a couple of jazzes, I had a Jarko custom shop for a little while, which is an incredible instrument.
Fretless?
Yeah.
So you even gone down the fretless?
Oh yeah. I'm quite comfortable on a fretless, which is it's a different monster.
Yeah.
And it's that thing, like I've played short scale basses for a time, and double bass and fretless and actives and passives, and I think that it's all this amazing little colour palette of bottom end.
For sure.
And I think that,
I mean, we've probably all been to a gig and saw a bass player playing something that you wouldn't even think twice about buying, but they sound great and they kill it on the gig. So within reason, anybody can make anything work and sound good.
Totally.
It's about what speaks to you.
Yeah. And what's the easiest? I talk about it a lot, being like the quickest path or the shortest path between my fingers and the speakers. And whatever gets the sound that your fingers are asking for out of the speaker is the right path.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I had a beautiful old P bass, which my parents bought me for my 21st. It's a 78. It's in immaculate condition. I got the case and the owner's manual and all the bits and pieces for it. It's an incredible bit of wood, but it's heavy. And I gigged with it solidly. It was my main thing for, I don't know, maybe 5 years. and I started getting neck pain and back pain and all those things that you get when you sling a 15 kilo bit of wood around your neck for a couple of hours a day. And I took it. I heard about Dave Paul at Bespoke Guitars and Orpheus Pickups. It's the same guy. And I called him up and went down there and spoke to him and took in my 78 and sort of went, this is the one, like this is the thing, but it's too heavy.
Yeah.
And he went, cool, well, I'll make you one. And
had you checked out his stuff before, or was it like a...
Not his basses, but he'd done some setup work for me. That's my telephone. He'd done some setup work for me. People love me. He'd done some setup work, and I think he'd made some pickups for my jazz bass, and that's where we built a rapport and a vocabulary about tone, and understanding, getting me to understand what he meant when he was using certain words, and understanding what a tone cap really does, and understanding how it does what it does, and understanding the different gauges of wire and the strengths of the magnets, and understanding those things. So when he built me those pickups, it was a real, for me, quite a frustrating time of trying to learn the language or a language that we could communicate in. And after that, it was like, cool, we'll build this bass. And he built this, and backwards and forwards a lot, about nut, the nut itself, what you make the nut out of, and there's like 5 or 6 choices.
What is it?
Well, so this is just bone. This is
it is bone?
It is bone, yeah, a bit of cow bone, I think. But, antler, stainless, brass, plastic, composite fibre, and again, there's no right or wrong. They're just different choices.
Yep.
And then you go down to the
You didn't want to go for the Warwick adjuster nut? Those screws?
I got a theory about the whole... No,
really? You got a theory about it?
I got a theory about that.
Yeah.
Well, they sell those as like you get to adjust it, and it's the same as the bridges. You can adjust it to. It's just so they can make one and put it on all of them.
Yeah.
Like
don't need to cut them differently or anything like that.
You don't have to. It's just one now.
Which is a good idea.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, I get it from their end, but it's kind of, I don't know. Some part of me feels like it's underhanded because, same as a Fender, right? Like they're all plastic. Now, when you create a vibration and you want to continue that vibration, plastic is like your enemy. It absorbs vibration, so you don't want it. But anybody that knows what they're doing is going to want to whip that plastic nut out and put something else in it anyway. So you're never going to be able to cut the right nut for every player. So you put plastic in, and someone that likes something else will go ahead and change it. Whereas Warwick's gone with we've designed this for you. When in actual fact,
and every time I changed the string, I was like,
it moved.
Did it go left or did it go right? You go, oh.
Yeah. Well, it's the same as your string spacing. I mean, I understand you can move it, open it up, and shrink it down, but your neck's the same size.
Yeah.
So you kind of just want to have your strings spaced across your neck evenly. I don't know. The whole thing's a little bit over-engineered, maybe, for my mind. But yeah, so bone nut, brass saddles. The bridge is made in Melbourne by Alan Pascoe. Amazing. I've actually replaced all the badass bridges I had on all of my basses with Alan's.
That's a lot of...
Yeah, that's a few bridges. I built a few bridges. And the pickup, Dave hand winds all his own pickups. So being able to, it's one thing to get online and go, well, I like the way that bass player sounds. I want his pickup. But there's a dozen other things that are going to change that.
Yeah, for sure.
Or you jump online and go, oh, well, the Damasio, that's what I want. But when you put it in your bass and you plug in your board and you plug in your amp, there's no way that they can tell you what it's going to sound like. So to be able to deal with a luthier or a guy that's making your pickup for you take it away to a gig, play a dozen gigs on it. You can then come back and go, it's great, but can we, it's not hot enough.
Yeah, it's the only way to know is on the gig, and also in the same bass as well.
Yeah.
Because I find it weird when somebody goes, "Oh, I really like the sound of your pickups." I'm like, I have no idea what my pickups sound like.
How
Because you've never sat there and swapped it out and gone and recorded it and listened back to it going, oh yeah, that one's like you can't say I don't think you can go and say I like the sound of that pickup.
No, I don't think you. Well, and the thing is as well, when you look at an instrument holistically, you can change the pickup, but if your brass, if your bridge and your nut are the same, you're only changing one part of 3 or 4 things that fundamentally affect the whole picture.
Exactly.
So. I'm not saying all pickups are the same, because they're not, but having someone that you can go back to and tweak. I think he had 3 runs. He'd hate me to tell anyone that, but I think he had 3 runs at this before I was happy. And
well, it's more your fault than his.
Yeah, that's true. I'm broken, and he put up with me. And having the 2 tone caps, and that's something else that is just so fundamental, especially for a P player. Because there's very few bells and whistles between the output and the pickup. So understanding what those bells and whistles actually do. And, I've got 2 tone caps in here, and essentially it's like pre-CBS, post-CBS, or half a meg and a full meg tone cap.
4 meg? Full meg?
Full meg, yeah, one and a half or one, yeah. And they people tell you can't hear the difference. I can, you can. We can. Yeah. There's a difference.
Yeah. It's such a great idea having 2 in the one thing.
Yeah, I mean,
does it exist?
Well, Gibson do those 5-way switches, and in some of those.
But that's just a
5
switch. There's no variance within the switch,
that switch runs a block of resin that's got different bits and wire and stuff in it, which essentially is that. But a little different. But yeah, so I mean, the idea is not new. It's a little different to put it in a P bass, but it just helps me get a little bit more spank out of the guitar when I want it, which means I don't have to take 2 basses or to a gig, or you can turn up and not know what you're walking into and still have a little.
So you would use the 1 meg for.
Well, bluesy, reggae, that end of town.
Yeah. And
then if I want to dig in, or I want to spank, or I want to cut through, you go to the half, and it just gives you that nose that you kind of don't normally get on a P.
Yeah, right.
And it is a subtle thing, and the bigger system you plug a subtle thing into, like Blues Fest, or you plug a little different thing in at this end. And at the other end, it's quite a difference.
Yeah, right.
And there's a lot of effects and a lot of pedals that you kind of, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't do anything. A lot of those enhancer pedals and sonic maximizers and stuff, you plug them into your amp and it's like, it doesn't make a difference. Plug them into a PA and there's like a massive difference. So it's one of those little things. But yeah, this thing, it plays great. I love it. Dave puts up with me. He's
and tuners,
well, they're reverse.
They are reversed.
They are reversed. Of course they are. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah.
And rather than being, I think Fender's 12-1, these are 16-1. So a little bit
more accurate.
Yeah.
Right.
Just a little bit more. I mean, it's arguable how much different.
They look like they're quite tall, or am I just imagining?
Well, they're just the vintage reverse. That's just the height of them.
Yeah. And so this is actually like to the millimeter an exact replica of your 78.
It's pretty close.
Did you change the body?
No, it's pretty much to put them next to each other. This is actually in worse nick. The paint job's in worse nick on this because we had it painted with super light nitro.
Because
I believe so Fender paints with quite thick paint.
Yeah.
And like most massive companies, decisions are made based on profit, just out of a path of the course. And obviously, well, not obviously, but they put quite a thick layer of undercoat which is easier to sand than the wood. And then they paint on top of the undercoat. So essentially they're saving time sanding the instrument back.
Okay.
So this was done with a really thin coat of nitro, and obviously putting that much paint on something, that much undercoat, that much paint, it's kind of like wrapping it in plastic. Which, you choose the wood of your instrument, it's nice to be able to hear it.
And this is older?
This is older. All of my basses, I didn't know this, but all my basses are older. Something that Dave picked up at some point is, and I didn't know that. I've not bought them because of that.
But you've been drawn to.
But the sound of the instrument and the way that it plays, I wouldn't say that it's an accident.
Yeah, right.
That they're all the same. And that's another thing. The wood's a wood. A lot of guys will tell you.
Well, especially in like maybe the acoustic folk world. I've had that before. It's just the sound of your strings and the pickup, isn't it? The wood doing the things and like. No. I definitely think wood affects the sound.
Yeah, and
I think that's one of the things that, for me, separates a lot of great luthiers at the minute is their knowledge of wood, and which woods to combine and how to treat it and how to store it. Like, my F bass is essentially a 5-string jazz. It's not a new concept, right?
No.
And it's just pretty basic, but those guys over there, as you probably won't know, they really know about wood, and I think that's one of the things that elevates it above. There's boutique bass builders everywhere. You can order from Croatia or Uzbekistan. There's somebody out there making a 5-string jazz that looks amazing, but unless they have that 20-year knowledge of woods, I think that's, for me, the difference between like your $5,000 bass and your,
Yeah, and I think the second you break $1,000, you should be playing a pretty solid instrument.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about those little 1%ers that make up the difference between a $1,000 instrument and a $5,000 instrument.
Yeah.
And the difference between a $5,000 instrument and a $10,000 instrument is even more finite.
Yeah.
And
it's even more bespoke almost.
Yeah. Totally. Niche. And it was what really, I was dead against. I was such a Fender guy. This is pretty embarrassing. I was dead against the idea of not playing a Fender. And I was happy to play Mexican Fenders, and I was happy to play whatever, like a Fender. And I was in Nashville, and I bumped into Bones Hillman. And I was telling him about this amazing luthier that had just put pickups in my jazz bass, and how amazing my jazz bass sounded now. And he kind of went, well, it's a Fender, man. You got ripped off. And I was gutted. I was absolutely gutted. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, for whatever the retail is on that instrument, there's a guy that will build you from the ground up for the same dollar a better instrument. And it took me about 6 months to, I was like, don't stab the bass player from Midnight Oil, don't, but there was this 5-point pizza, Anyway, but and that was a big turning one for me as well. It's like, oh right, okay, actually understanding the bits and the sum of the whole.
Sum of the whole, for sure,
is super important, and the strings, and I'm actually really gutted about strings. These are D'Adarios, and I bought a stack of D'Adarios just recently because you can buy them in bulk, and they're all right. You can afford to change them, essentially.
Yeah.
But I fell in love with Federa strings, which they've just stopped importing last year or the year before or whatever it was. So I couldn't get them anymore. And the reason I really, really dug them is that they had a light gauge. So these are a 40 to 100.
Okay.
And I just find that, I don't know, it speaks to me a little bit better. I get a little bit more dig out of them. Mm-hmm. Again, I think going with a P-bass, which has got that big round muscle vibe, and putting light gauge strings on it so you can dig in and get a little spank, kind of helps you find that middle ground. Again, and give me a little bit more versatility.
And if you want more bottom end, you just go.
There's a knob on your amp for that.
There is. There's a knob for everything these days.
But yeah, so that's this thing.
Yeah.
And
quite a journey.
Yeah, it is.
Is it over?
No. Well, yes. In regard to bass, at this point I don't need anything else. I'm not on the hunt for. I mean, I just recently saw Booker T and his bass player's got a 5-string, which kind of reignited that flame for me about maybe looking at a 5. But I feel like I'm going over to the dark side, so I don't know if I can. Don't know if I can go there, but we'll see. I don't need another instrument. This speaks
sure
for me better than anything else I've ever played. And I can't imagine needing anything else. I mean, I do have a jazz bass. I do have a telly bass. I do have a vintage P and another P and.
But you grab.
But this is it. This is the one that lives in the gig bag. This is the one that unless I've got a country gig, or unless I know I'm going out with an envelope filter to play funk, this is it. This is and this would do that too. But
exactly, yeah.
I can playing country on a P is kind of where it's at. But having the tally and being able to go to that extreme is kind of nice. So yeah, this does it for me and. Like I was saying before, I remember doing a recording once, and there was like 3 or 4 preamps
in the chain
between me and the guy recording it, and I was just, I don't know, I don't even know why it was then, but I was like, what am I doing? What do I need 4 EQ sections for? And if it works for you, it works for you. That's great, but. Dumbing it down and pulling that stuff out and having a clean, just solid bottom end, actually getting the instrument to give you that tone you're looking for before you've plugged anything else in is kind of the best place to start.
For sure. Yeah, get the source right. And then anything else should be enhancing that.
Yeah, or changing that because of whatever it is. But yeah, and that's something that I've learnt to do, and I really dig it.
Yeah, it's killer. Sounds great.
Yeah, it's the one.
And rig wise, you're running the Mark bass.
Mark bass, yeah. I got on Mark bass pretty early. I'm on my 3rd Mark bass head now, and I've dug this stuff for a long time, and I've never had any major problems with it. Lightweight, powerful, punchy, all the things that. You want it to, and it's funny. You put a Mark bass head next to a bunch of other digital heads, and I think it sounds a little nicer for my ear. It does all the things I want it to. But just recently, I've fallen in love with a 100-watt Bassman and the matching 15 that goes with it.
Of course, it has the matching 15.
Of course, you gotta and it's not until you go back and plug into a valve amp that you go, yeah, there really is, like, we are playing with artificial sweetener,
Yep.
But it does the job, and
totally. Well, I mean, that's the thing is, like, when you're doing 7 gigs a week for $150,
yeah,
what are you going to bring? That thing or the thing that just does the job well.
Yeah.
It's maybe not tone Nirvana every night, but like we've also talked about before, you're so often at the mercy of the room, that you bring someone like that, and that's the worst is when you go, I've got my rig. When I had my 750, I was like, yes, this is it. 750, Epiphany, 310, take it to the gig, and it's like, what? Why does this not sound good? It's just like, I just got sick of that more often than not. It's just like, the differences between the Mark bass head and the 750 are obvious in a controlled environment. Once you get out onto the stage and in those rooms that are different week in, week out, the cons outweigh the pros.
Yeah,
for
definitely.
Me in terms of gig life.
Definitely.
If I had a regular thing or I was only gigging here and there and I knew it was going to be X, then I would go, okay, I'll have that. But the load in, the ease of use, it's hard to turn down.
Yeah, no, it is, and that's just modern playing, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, not having someone to carry a W bin up a flight of stairs for you really changes your need for that W bin, you know. But yeah, Mark, I've got a bit of a thing for electroharmonics pedals.
Yeah. So you got the worst octave ever made on there?
Well, yes, yeah. It's funny that we have very, very different universe opinions there, because I think this is possibly the nicest octave pedal.
It does, yeah. It sounds pretty good. I think maybe mine was Goosed. Like you say, the electroharmonics quality control isn't always up there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, and I mean, in regard to octaves, there's kind of two schools. You've got your analog roundness, which I feel I get out of that, and you've got your synth.
Yep.
Synth vibe, which is again totally cool, and it's an octave and it does all those things, but it just sounds like a synth to me, and that doesn't sound like just an octave.
Well, I mean, my first octave pedal was the EBS Octabase, which I feel is more along that kind of analogy.
Yeah, definitely. But it really comes into its own with the X Blender, which is basically an effects loop with its own EQ, so you can separate your clean bass sound
and a blend
with the effect or whatever you've got plugged into the loop is the word I'm looking for. Now that on its own I find a little bit overwhelming, so that never goes anywhere without this.
The Octaver.
Yeah. Even with the blend.
So do you run it fully wet, and get the blend from the Exciter? Not the Exciter, the X Blender.
Well, I mean, it's not full, but you're heading that way, like much more than you ever would if you didn't have that loop control.
Yeah, because you wouldn't want that full crappy octave sound in your...
Crappy, yeah. But yeah, you know, and I mean, I got on that trip with the bigger one, the 70s one that they did. I was on a hip hop gig, and the dude that did the gig before me was using one of those, and it just thumped.
Yeah.
It really and it was I was like, wow, that's an octave sound. And I've got one of those, but this is just, I minimized everything. I used to have a huge board that had its own power supply and its own mic stand, and it was like huge, right? And a little while ago I went, right, I'm going to buy a Pedal Train Nano board, and anything that doesn't fit on the board isn't allowed to leave the house. And so that's the size of my board, regardless of the gig I'm doing. I've got umpteen million pedals, and I'm allowed to swap things out, but I'm not allowed to take anything that outside of my tuner, which doesn't count. It goes, you put that on your amp. You don't need that on the floor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not allowed to take anything else, which keeps me honest.
Yeah. It's almost like, the whole the stripping away the fat in terms of gear is parallels in terms of playing. Musical, stripping away the fat as well. Have you kind of been on that journey as well, where you go, actually I'm just going to do this one note instead of four? Or
I think...
Or have you always kind of been more just in that grounded...
No, I mean, you go through that, I mean, everyone had a Jarko phase, everyone wants to get on stage and have all the lights shine on them and play, Come On, Come Over with a 10-piece band behind them.
Well, you say that until it actually happens. And
you don't want
to go, I'm a bass player, I shouldn't be, don't look at me.
Yeah.
And I think that's the kind of the dichotomy a lot of the time, is that bass players were generally background guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we practice stuff that is foreground chops.
Well, it's all music. Like, we've all got the same notes.
Yeah.
And all the things that can be done with notes can be done on any instrument that creates notes. So, as much as I'd rather sit on a whole note through a chord change, you need to be able to understand that there are all of these other notes,
Yeah.
all of those horn parts, and all of those, you know.
I mean, some guys can totally make it work. Like, I mean, Jamerson, right?
Oh.
Or Willie Weeks.
Yeah.
Or Rocco. Like, if you did that many notes on a gig,
you'd be fired. You wouldn't get through the gig.
But when you hear them, I don't even think that there's a lot of notes. I just think it's a great bass part.
Subtlety. It's the constant struggle. and I mean, I find myself, maybe too honest, but you find yourself at a gig and there's a player who you really respect, and there's that seesaw going on in your head where you're going, well, I could have put these notes in there, and the next time it comes around you do put those notes in there because you want to make sure that everyone knows that you can put those notes in there.
Yep.
Which is really self-defeating because it was better without those notes in there. And I try and err on that side of it personally, you know, and pocket playing and just recently I was lucky enough to be at Blues Fest this year and Mavis Staples band, Jeff Terms is her bass player and has been for 10 years or whatever, and that dude is just pocket.
Yeah, right.
You know, like I'm just standing there and watching him do his thing, and you're like, he hasn't got a care in the world. He is just in on that bass drum, and it just effortlessly oozes out of the guy. And he's not, you know, he's just sitting on a 1/4.
That's great bass playing.
Sitting on the groove, and it was, you know, in comparison to everything else there, I didn't really notice any other players. Yeah. You know, in the way that I noticed him, and yeah, man, massive pocket playing, and that's for me. Yeah. What I hope people get from my playing. And,
for sure.
And I hope that, you know.
Well, I mean, I think your calendar reflects that, you know.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, I mean, it's great. It's great to be able to play, and it's great to get that phone call when you know, someone you don't know, or someone that you've heard about, or someone you've respected, or someone, you know, calls you up and goes, "Hey, we need someone to come and do that thing you do." Yeah. And the first time that happened for me, I was just like, "Wow, there's people out there know what I do." You know, I thought I was just sucking and not playing many notes. You know, so it's it's important to listen. It's important to keep your ears open. It's important to play the song first and foremost, and as a support instrument. Yeah. You know, not playing sometimes, actually making the choice to stop playing, which seems so, you know, like foreign to most players. You just stop. You know, the horns stop when it's not time for the horns to play. Yeah. You know? Yeah. So what's wrong with the bass stopping when there's, you know, give it that room. Yeah.
What's kind of been your gig journey, I guess? I mean, you know, you said you started out playing punk stuff, but I mean, you came to my radar as like the kind of the blues, you know, on the blues scene around here, but what else do you do? What's your, I mean, if you could do anything?
It's funny. I mean, I love what I do. I genuinely live for sitting in a pocket with a drummer, laying out blues tunes or, you know, country tunes, or, you know, it took me a long time to find a pocket in country. I never quite got that. But I approach country or Americana the same way I approach reggae nearly. You know, it's the same kind of note length and back, and really not lazy, you know, lazy playing. You get away with falling off the one. You get away with sort of stumbling into stuff. As long as it's a choice and you're not actually, you don't know what you're doing and just stumbling into stuff. But yeah, you know, I mean, the punk stuff and you know, I did my first kind of festival stuff, Apollo Bay and those kind of festivals in punk bands, and then Americana country blues stuff for a little while, and I played with Dan Waters on that record a little while back, which was great. That won a bunch of awards, that Americana record. But the blues, ever since I saw that show of Lloyd's, the blues has always been there, and has always been a really, really solid part of my playing. And I think sometimes to a detriment, like when a player needs a bass player to play songs rather than blues, 12 bars and stuff. I don't know that I always get those phone calls, which is, it's okay, and, I don't mind, but that's in there too. There's no reason why I can't.
Sure.
It's all... But you do, you kind of, you get the phone calls you get because you do the gigs you've been doing, and it just snowballs from there. I genuinely appreciate that when a blues band comes from anywhere else in the country and they're looking for a rhythm section, not all the time, but quite often I'll get a phone call, whether it's the second or third phone call, I don't know, but you're on the list. I'm on the list. And in a town like Melbourne, where there are countless players and just a monster behind every instrument, like there's, it's nice to be on a list
for
somewhere.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know that I'd if someone came along one day and said, you can have any gear you would, your heart desires, and you can have any gig your heart desires, I don't know that my world would change all that much.
That's
that's
awesome. It's a pretty special place to be in.
Yeah, I'm super lucky.
Yeah.
And I take stock every day. I had a near death sickness thing late last year, and it really made me question everything I'm doing. And I was in a very interesting position because I was sick on a cruise ship, and they'd isolated me. I was in a little room, no window, no TV, no internet.
Been there.
For I was on the boat for 4 days. So I had a lot of time to really ponder.
So it was during that period, in that time that you...
Yeah, I think, I'm happy with my life. I've been happy for a little while, but that's when I really boiled it down and sitting in that room just going, well, they're going to say, because, I was sure I was going to die, and they're going to say, well, he died doing what he loved. It's like, well, I'm playing on a cruise ship. I don't know that that's necessarily ticking all of those boxes, but, I got back to Melbourne and I play with people who I respect. I play with people who I'm genuinely friends with.
Yeah.
I play with different people all the time. And, how much better can it get than that? Genuinely, it'd be nice to not ever have to worry about the rent. It'd be nice.
It'd be nice if our wages went up every year.
Yeah, well, a little inflation since the 70s would have been nice.
Would be nice,
you know.
Geez, like Reggio.
Oh, dude, don't even get me started.
It's like everything else that we consume can justify putting the prices up. But when people consume music, the price has gone down.
Yeah, and it's... Melbourne's in a really interesting spot. It's a double-edged... Melbourne's in quite an interesting little spot because we have so many gigs. There's no demand.
It's
because there are, and we've got so many great players, and it's an amazing breeding ground.
Yeah.
For monster musicians and monster players and monster bands, and our standard is, up there with the world.
Oh, totally,
in every field, in every, we really are kicking goals. The problem with that is that, I don't have to pay $2 to get into this gig.
Yeah.
Because I can go 100 metres down the road and get into that gig for free.
And buy a $12 pint of beer.
Oh, people that won't We shouldn't even.
Let's go there.
Yeah. Well, all right. People that won't pay $10 to get in to see a show, but will buy a 5-piece band a round of shots. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, don't buy me the shot. I'm driving home. Give me the $10.
Yeah.
Because I got to put petrol in the car. You know, like it, and it is what it is.
Yeah. But one of the things I talk about with musicians and stuff is that, hey, if we don't support our own industry, how can we expect the civilians, the non-music public to support it? I mean, like, if we're not going out and checking out gigs and supporting each other and paying to go and see shows, then why do we think that anyone else would? And we're the music lovers at the end of the day. We play the music. You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, the real kicker for me is knowing that tickets to shows in Australia sell really well statistically. We spend $4.5 billion a year, the Australian public, going out to see live entertainment.
That's a pretty big number.
Right?
Yeah.
But in Melbourne, people will pay $70 to go and see an American rock band.
Yeah.
Not a problem. People will pay $200 to go and see Pink. Not a problem. Not a question. What were the tickets front row for the Rolling Stones? Was it $600 or something? I think. I mean, I could be making that up, but I think. But getting that same punter to open his wallet and spend $10 is like an affront on his freedom to go into a venue. You know, and it's, I mean, whatever. You know, we sell good times and fun.
Well, we're in the market of selling beers.
That's true.
As somebody once told me.
Yeah, we are.
And you're in that end of the business, like you're booking?
To some extent. I don't know. I fell into it, you know.
Yeah.
Rhythm section management in Sydney. Howler and Ryan are actually an amazing rhythm section themselves. Monster players.
Yeah.
And they do blues and roots stuff, and I do blues and roots stuff here in Melbourne, and I kind of always have. And, you know, I run a couple of nights myself, you know, paying players to turn up and do the thing, which is great. And we just kind of were on the same page, and they used to call me and say, oh, we've got a band coming to town. What should we do? Where should we play? And that just kind of evolved into, hey, do you want to do this for us? And so now I've got that, which is frustrating.
Dealing with musicians,
dealing with venues.
Has it changed how you are when somebody calls to book you, or have you always been pretty much?
What it has done is changed my perspective on how I expect to be treated, and with communication. And like, I'll go and do a gig for, you know, nothing, $70, whatever. If it's a show I want to do, and they've been upfront about it,
and the person at the front isn't making $500.
Yeah, you know. But it's one of those things that, you know, when you start booking shows and you start communicating with venues, and you get into the habit of what questions to ask and what needs to be clear and what needs to be in writing and what needs to be done. Yeah. That then when you do get that phone call from someone that goes, oh, it could be, you know, this and it could be that. It's like, well, I don't actually mind, but what I do need is the information. Yeah. And I'll, you know...
Because you've been there so many times where you're told one thing and you get then it's something different.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to back it up.
Yeah, you know, and I you know, I don't mind, I'll come and do it, but I need to know, and it needs to be firm, you know, because we all budget our weeks on what we're getting paid, you know, week to week.
Yeah, pretty much.
Month to month, you know, and yeah. So no, it hasn't changed my perspective on all of it, but it's definitely changed the way in which I handle myself and the way I deal with people.
And what advice would you give to other people who may be booking their own band or that kind of thing, in terms of dealing with venues and what to expect and what not to expect, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you say, we're in the business of selling beers.
Yeah.
And helping the venue sell beers doesn't necessarily mean having the most spot-on musical show.
Yeah.
It does mean having a great vibe, having some energy, having the room dance so they're thirsty, you know, just flowing from that. And giving a venue every chance to succeed in making money.
Yep.
You know, being the easy people to deal with, being the guy that calls them back, being the guy that, oh yeah, I'll send you that, being the guy that actually sends that.
Yeah.
You know, because the difference between your band and the next band to a venue is
12 hours.
absolutely nothing. You know what I mean? Yeah, you know, it's like it's not. So being that guy that does what he says when he says it, here's a video, here's the posters, here's the event we've put up on Facebook.
Yeah.
Without having the venue go, now you need to do the thing and you've got to have a thing, and like just do it. You know the venue's going to ask for it.
Yeah.
Get on the front foot and be someone they don't have to worry about.
Sure.
And you'll get another one. You know, be that person they've got to stress about, be that person they've got to chase, whether it's for the invoice or for Facebook or for, you know, just the less you can make everyone around you stress, the more chance you've got of...
And if you, because obviously Facebook in terms of the gig industry is a relatively new medium.
Yeah.
Do you place much emphasis on it, or because I know, you know, there's the worst thing you could do is go, well, I made a Facebook event and nobody turned up. Like that's really not the core. It shouldn't be the core of any kind of gig management or booking thing.
No, it's not.
Just a box to tick.
Yeah,
and yeah, you will get some people through it, but
yeah. Well, I mean, if you're getting 10% of the people that say yes, they're coming to your event actually turn up, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
So that's 1 in 10. So no, it's not an effective strategy to make people turn up. Having a show that people are talking about, having whether you know set yourself on fire or set the bar on fire or I don't know, whatever it is that you do.
As long as there's fire.
As long as there's fire. Fire is the key to a career in this industry. You know, people want to come and see that show.
Yeah.
People want to come and feel a little bit scared, you know, a little bit excited. But yeah, Facebook, you know, and it's funny because venues are now being managed and booked by people that have come through music college or, you know, industry classes in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And they're trained at school to demand a Facebook event. Now,
it's always one of the first things that I get in an email.
Yep. And I'm not saying that it's not worth doing it. I mean, it takes 5 minutes, essentially. So it's not hard to do. And if it's something that the venue's expecting, regardless of the fact that it's pointless, do it. But, you know, I work in the blues and roots end of the spectrum. Now, the consumers of blues and roots don't have Facebook accounts.
Yeah.
They don't interact with Facebook the same way that you or I do.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so creating a Facebook event has absolutely no impact, generally, on pulling those people into a room. Having a really solid mailing list, which is outdated and antiquated, but it's really important in the blues and roots industry, and I'm sure world, and I'm sure that it can't hurt everyone else.
No.
Actually being able to send out a MailChimp going, this is what we did last month, this is what we've got coming up next month, and here's
because
some photos.
Facebook now is so cluttered that the chances of your event or whatever being noticed by the people you want it to be noticed is getting less and less and less.
Yeah. Unless you pay for it.
Yeah, the mailing list is actually probably making a return. You know?
And, you know, it's always hard getting people into a pub. You know, 6 months of the year in Melbourne, it's wet and it's cold and it's dreary.
Yeah.
So, well, but you can't not gig for 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, and then there's the footy season. You don't book anything in line. You don't book anything in September. You just don't.
Yeah.
Because, you know, no one's coming because the footy's on, you know. But, you know, you manage it. You work out ways of getting around it. You know, you can't not gig.
Yeah.
You know.
Sure.
But it's, in terms of advice for someone who's doing it all, is just try and do as much of it as you can in every direction, because what works for me or what works for you or works for the next band mightn't work for you, and something else might. And at the end of the day, when you're handing someone an invoice and expecting it to be paid, regardless of whether it's a $200 invoice or a $2,000 invoice, you don't want them to be able to look you in the eye and go, well, you didn't do that thing. Whatever that thing is, you know, we should have got posters 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
There should have been a Facebook push. Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because, you know.
Do you feel that venue owners and promoters pull their weight?
That's dangerous.
True.
Well,
in some of my experiences, it's been like, I'll email a venue for a gig and they go, sure, you can have this date. But then it's just like, but then I have to organise the 2 support acts, I have to organise the sound, I have to organise a door person, I have to do everything that I thought the booker, promoter, venue, not everything, but at least a large majority of the stuff I thought would be their job. Otherwise, I don't want to give you a cut of the thing, you know?
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's, every room's different. You know, there are some people out there that look at it from, you know, there are musicians out there that do exactly the same thing but in opposite, you know, and this industry, as far as I've kind of worked out, is all about relationships, you know, and there are certain people I can call and go, hey, I want to do this.
Yeah. And
because of my track record with them personally, I might be able to flesh out a deal that's a little bit better or a little bit different to someone who they've never spoke to before. And yeah, there are venues out there that make it really hard for everybody, and there are definitely bands out there that make it really hard for venues.
True, yeah.
And that's the thing, you know, that like once bitten, twice shy, you know, like when a guy calls you and goes, hey, yep, I've got 600 mates and we're all coming and we want to get hammered and it's going to be great. And you put on extra bar staff and you put on extra security and this dude and his 3 housemates turn up. You know, so you know. Yeah,
don't be the guy that makes it harder for all
everybody.
The other,
you know, and it's that whole. We live in an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Where, you know, the venues react the way they do because the bands have treated them the way they do, and the bands treat the venues the way they do because the venues have treated the way.
Cycle.
And you know, and it's about busting out of that.
Be the change you want to see.
Well, you know, work to pay your rent. You know, like it's it's not always fun.
Yeah,
it's not always fair, you know, but
it evens out over the.
You hope so.
You know, I mean, you've done a bunch of festival stages and stuff as well.
Yeah.
What's some of the do's and don'ts in terms of that scene, or what would you say, especially for bass players? Here's something to look out for in terms of playing on the big stages, or any kind of little, you know, nuggets that you go, when I'm playing a festival stage, I always bring this, or I'm always kind of looking for that.
Yeah, when you go out, whether it's a festival or a tour or whatever, and you're not sure what your backline's going to be, I don't generally travel with a preamp, but I've got an old Sans amp, one of the early Sans amp pre's, and if I don't know what I'm going to get, you know, I take that and I plug straight into the effects return of whatever it is amplifier I'm given, because I know it.
Sure.
You know, you don't want to be the guy struggling with the buttons that you don't know what they do and turning the knobs and making, you know, you just don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. When you've got your 4-minute sound check.
Yeah, you know. And even with a mark bass, like I'll take the mark bass with me and just put it on top of.
That's it. I mean, there's a difference in size between the Sans amp and a mark bass. Not huge
these
days.
Yeah. It's not a big step, you know. And it's funny, quite often you know, obviously you get just about every stage. I mean, the industry standards are a fridge and an SVT, you know. And although they are the industry standard and there's nothing wrong with them, I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the SVT. I've you know, the Pro and all of them. I've just never really dug it. And I will take the mark bass and just sit it on top. And before you touch anyone else's gear, you know, you got to remember that stage is that stage manager's until the clock ticks over and it's yours. And then it's yours for 45 minutes or an hour and a quarter. And then you hand it back to the stage manager the way you found it.
Yeah, right.
So hey, I'm just gonna, and a lot they see what you're holding, and they know what you're gonna do, and they tell you it's fine. You walk over, make sure the amp's off, unplug the power, unplug the speaker lead, plug your amp in, away you go. And but
don't unplug the speaker with it still turned on and have it
all those things. Any of those things those things blow up themselves. They don't need you to help. But and it's a workplace. It is a workplace where people are doing 18-hour, 20-hour days.
Yeah.
And I think production crews get the short stick quite often because the musician, asked for a thing that wasn't on the tech sheet. They didn't email anyone about it. They haven't asked anyone about it. You're asking for it. They crack it because production crews. I think production crews get the short stick. They're doing massive hours, and you've got to be able to get on and get off and do your show, and the show needs to be stellar.
Yeah.
But making their lives easy, communicating. After an 18-hour day, after your third 18-hour day in a row, the snotty bass player that goes, "Oh, can I have the..."
Yeah. Or plugs everything in and then plugs that into the bass and it goes.
Yeah. If you wouldn't do it to your gig, your gear at home, don't.
Yeah. But it's the kind of thing you only do once and then you learn. Remember it.
Especially on a big stage.
Yeah.
But understanding how the monitor sends are actually wired, so when you ask for something through the foldback, you don't look like a dick because it actually doesn't divide that way.
Right. Yeah.
As simple as when you go on stage. Hey, so is it left and right front of stage, or is there 4 sends across the front, or is it where's the bass? Where, and knowing that stuff. So when you ask for something that is actually physically unreasonable, you know it before you've asked for it.
Sure.
Just comes down to communication, I guess.
And it's a totally different vibe, feeling playing on like those big stages than playing in a small room.
Oh, it's really hard.
I found it really hard. Like, I mean, we did the Mornington festival.
That was a big stage.
It was a big stage with a fridge.
Mm-hmm.
It's the biggest stage and we're a 8-piece band, so it's not like we were, But even then, it was just like everything's just so much louder and bigger and further away, and the audience is further away, and you almost get more inside yourself than on a smaller stage with people closer.
Oh, definitely. And I mean, not having a back wall for your amp to come off.
Yeah.
Like just sonically playing outside is super different.
Totally.
Because you're only hearing it once.
Yeah.
And there's extremes to the other side. That the inaugural Blues and Roots Festival, or whatever it is they did here in Melbourne, Blues and Music Festival, I think they called it, and it was in Jeff's shed, and you'd hear the snare drum, and then you'd hear the snare drum off the back wall, and then you'd hear the snare drum off the opposite wall. So everything sounded like it had a slapback delay on it. And so you're standing in this room trying to play.
Yeah, right.
And you've just got everything has delay on it, but at the end of the day, you just look at the bass drum and play to it and not cock it up, But it's all those things, and it's a different set of skills. It's a different set of learning skills, and it's a different set of, you don't just turn up 10 minutes before you play and do your thing. Like you can kind of get away with playing blues gigs in Melbourne. You can stack 3 gigs on top of each other and literally not have enough time between them, and still, in Melbourne. But you don't get to do that.
Yeah. Because it's happened in the past where that bass player doesn't turn up. Nobody wants to have to go looking for somebody on a festival site or that kind of thing.
Yeah. And you don't stay there. If you're going to play in that league, you got to play by the rules, because the next guy will.
Yeah.
I dig it. I really dig it. It's good to be scared by gigs occasionally. It's good to be kind of mammoethed by the reality of what you're about to do.
And pull it off.
and get away with it. Yeah.
Yeah, or get away with it. I'm gonna call it that.
And yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, and there's always a bigger stage. It's just like there's always, when you learn that new thing, you learn that new lick, and you turn up to a gig, and you're like, I'm gonna destroy this gig. I'm gonna play the best solo. I'm gonna get my solo, and it's gonna be awesome. And then the guy calls the solo in a different song, and you're in a different key, and you're trying to work out how that fits in that key because you've still got the lick. And then you look up, and like Becca's in the front row, and you're just like, doesn't matter what I learnt today because
Yeah.
I get eaten alive by that guy, and it's always good to stay humble and but be pushed, and be scared of that next thing.
Yeah.
Which is that big stage, that big festival stage at the moment for me,
Yeah.
Playing to 11,000 people at a time, or
Yeah.
playing to, it's good, it's healthy.
Yeah, man. Seems like a good place to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
I think.
Cool.
Tons of awesome stuff in there, man.
Well, I hope I haven't made myself look too much of a knob. And
Not at all. I will edit it so you look like a knob.
yeah, you send me one copy and then look, you're not a knob at all.
No.
There's the one that goes on the internet.
Yeah. But anyway, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks for having me.
Stuff. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Ben Wicks, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for all of it.
Nice one, man.
See ya.
Cool.